What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Fantasy Overwatch Underground. All you undergrounders, all you cavemen. Analytics tells me there's no females watching this show, so maybe it is accurate to call all of us cavemen here. Hey, thanks for tuning in. I'm really excited. It was a long week of Overwatch, long weekend, and in the middle of it, I was kind of sick of all the Lucio Moira and thought I was hating it. But looking back on the weekend, it left a lot of good memories here. Maybe one of the top ones here is Shu and his hard carrying for the Gladiators. But overall, just a lot of impressionable moments here for what really stood out as a good week of Overwatch. Maybe good, maybe bad, maybe a little bit ugly with Lee Jae-gon and his now infamous 10 environmental kills on a single map. It was incredible. Across the board, though, fantasy-wise, there was a lot to consider. I think Moira dominated much like we thought, but there was a DPS swap where the Reaper players were outscoring the Echoes in an unexpected manner. And maybe actually some waiver wire pickups, which you may not expect for this particular week in the season. So without further ado, as is tradition here, the Monday or Tuesday after games, I've got the 10 transactions. Although this week I'm a little bit lazy. I only came up with 6 transactions. But here they are. I'm going to read them off here. Number 1 most important move, if it wasn't already done, Vestola is your top waiver addition. The Paris Eternal's new flex tank replacing Elevote. Second, we've got FunnyAstro, who is now in Korea. He has 2 weeks of quarantine, but it seems like he should be available for future stages. And as you know, he's been one of our best main support players historically. I'm not worried about Toby personally, but we'll talk about Astro a little bit later. Number 3 waiver addition is EQO, who made his Overwatch League 2021 debut. Number 4, I've got Kaneki. Don't do it. Don't pick him up. Number 5, called it forget about it. All of Washington. I'm giving them forgiveness for their terrible week where they went 0-6 map-wise. I think they're back, and I think they've proven that they're a team capable of recovering quickly. Last, stick a fork in it. I'm done with Guangzhou. I'm tired of starting their players. And frankly, you know my opinion on Choi So-won. He's fantastic. Krong is fantastic. Outside of those two, it is painful watching this team. So those are my 6 transactions. I'm going to dig into these specifically. And then after digging through these specific transactions, since there aren't so many, I'm going to jump into statistics a little bit further too, since I've got some interesting stats I've been looking at this week. Hope you enjoy the show. Let's go. Let's actually finish watching Lee finish Genji. Okay, now let's go. So let's get to Vestola. Vestola does a little bit of everything. I think he looked really strong on the Diva. We also saw him on the Sigma. And overall, he's already an upgrade over Elevote. Now, I always liked Elevote, but Elevote was never going to be anything but a lower tier Diva. I'm not sure Vestola is a lot above that, but I think he showed a lot here. So Vestola was a hawk, not literally the Atlanta Reigns hawk, but he was a hawk just following around one specific Kevster. And also at times Bird Ring as well. Both DPSs were very dangerous, but I saw Vestola seem to have the task of zoning out Kevster, and I think did a really good job of it. And in this particular clip, it's my favorite of the day for Vestola because Vestola does a little bit of everything. If I speed us back up to full speed here and go through what's been done here, there's a brawl of a fight here. And you see Vestola, kind of blowing through here and getting the elim on Kevster after previously trying to use the Matrix in the dive effectively. Vestola has bomb, and it's not like it's an amazing bomb that gets Bird Ring, but he's able to build his ult just fast enough to have that. And then on the disengage, they have the halt and boop combination. Vestola, of course, a boop like that to clean up a fight isn't anything spectacular, but we're really, I got to show it because I think Vestola did a good job zoning, good ult usage, good dives. Only some of which we saw from Elevote. I feel like Vestola is a little bit more aggressive and able to min-max more so than Elevote, who I think was much more of a defensive diva. An offensive diva means more fantasy points, although here we see Vestola with the aggressive bomb And then as Birdring is taking down Khan, we get Vestola just hard focusing Birdring here, trying to zone out, and then getting the elims to follow up here. So, Birdring not able to get much value as, the Gladiators are trying to hang in there on a fight. Vestola playing goalie quite a bit here. While we are still in dangerous sample size territory here, if we're looking on a per 10 basis, Vestola is, I don't know, like number 11 or 12 or so, whereas Elevote was down there much, much lower. So very dangerous to look at stats after 1 week, but not a bad showing from Vestola on that per 10 basis. Really, really pumping out the fantasy points in the first week here. For our second waiver pickup, we've got EQO, who made his Overwatch League debut for the year. And interestingly enough, we saw him play McCree. Mostly we saw him stick to some of his old heroes, though. Philly really had some interesting lineup decisions. They went technically here a double projectile, running EQO and Rascal, who are two projectile heroes. They benched Carpe. They had an easy week this week against the Charge and against the Valiant, so it's hard to take any evaluation of him too seriously. We gotta wait for another week. But I'm definitely seeing some classic EQO. We saw him on the Ekko, and he really went toe-to-toe with Choice of One. It's always hard to compare when the Charge are struggling like they are, but he often was getting his ult charge faster, and I think he looks better than Rascal so far. Everything I say, please take with a huge grain of salt. They played the Charge, they played the Valiant. Two teams really struggling right now. He did warrant a pocket mercy at times from Toby, indicating that, in this comp lineup, they want to see what he can do. With the pocket mercy, it tends to say, you trust your Ekko. So, pretty interesting to see that. He played the Mei as well. He's never going to play the Mei as well as Rascal. Rascal is one of my favorites. But, he did land a lot of icicles. He did have 2 blizzards eaten by Krong, if I'm recalling correctly. But outside of those blizzards, I thought his Mei looked solid. And, of course, on the Ekko, I think, when the hero first came out, he established himself for a period of time as, a top-tier Ekko player before Ivy benched him. But overall, very solid Ekko player who I think has the higher ceiling than Rascal does. The fact that they put him on McCree, I don't know. I don't take it too seriously. With Carpe around, eventually possibly having Shockwave someday, maybe we don't see him on the McCree ever again. But these days anybody can play a Reaper, and we saw EQO there as well. Might as well bust out some stats to support it. Not a stellar week on a per 10 basis or overall scoring, but you'll see here he was, startable. He did have the best week of any Fusion player, although once again, this wasn't a good Philly Fusion week with their easy matchups. To me, the most interesting part is, about 50% of his time was on the Ekko, a little bit of McCree, a little bit of Mei, and then a solid amount of Reaper. I guess he played some Symmetra too. Oh yeah, for 1 point. I forgot about that. But, a much more eclectic series of heroes than you'd expect from EQO. I think going forward, it's more likely to project him splitting projectile time with Rascal. It's a bit of a wild guess, a shot in the dark, but I do think he is going to get more time than Rascal going forward. Of course, all dependent on the meta. I'm going to take a short detour here. I meant to include some talk about Marvel and 2U in the 10 transactions, the 6 transactions as well. Consider this the secret 7th transaction since I forgot it up front until I got to this clip. But we saw Seoul pivot away from their hog strategy that wasn't working. I suppose it's nice to see Seoul do something different when what they're doing isn't working and make some coaching adjustments, but on the whole, they did not look great this week. The tank line is forever going to be confusing. My personal point of view on this one is I get kind of annoyed at people that say, why are they putting Marvel on off tank? When Gesture's playing hog, anything goes. Sigma is more of an off tank than hog, I see Sigma as more of a main tank than hog. It depends on the meta, right? But when they're playing hog and they throw Sigma in there, who is the main tank? Who's the off tank? I don't like that commentary. I've always thought that Marvel was a very, very good Sigma. This rock here on Eileen's blade was amazing from 2U. I thought he particularly played well on Sigma this week. And it just makes me wonder, like, I don't know what's going forward for this team and their tank line. They're clearly struggling. It's not outside the realm of possibility that someday we see a Marvel 2U combination. But I really don't know what to make of it. You know, if 2U had come out here and had a bad Sigma week, I would have been able to say, all right, you know, if Sigma comes back in the meta, it's going to be Marvel. Now I can't say that with confidence. You know, here we see Gesture on the ball as well, not Marvel. So I don't know what Marvel's place is. Right now I think Gesture and 2U are the much safer plays as they've been. Marvel may have been a red herring. But you guys know I love Marvel, so we'll see what happens going forward. So next up with Kaneki, don't do it. I'm not here to say that Kaneki had a bad week. I thought he actually had a pretty good week. If you watched any of my preseason videos, you saw some of the tragic Kaneki blades. And unfortunately, this was one more of those. I really don't like him on the Genji. But I'm not here to kind of crap on Kaneki, right? I very much enjoyed his play this week. At times. At other times, it was not so good. But on the whole, he impressed me much more than I thought he would. I think he's earned his way into some playing time to now water down Jinmu and Jimmy's value even further, making that second DPS slot on Chengdu just completely unstartable in fantasy. On this particular clip, you see Kaneki do some real work in the kill feed and on screen on the Ekko. It's unfortunate because I think Ekko was his best looking hero of the weekend. But of course, if Ekko is the primary DPS for any particular week, you know Leave is going to be on their carry hero. If we do reach a point where we have a Tracer Ekko meta, I could definitely see them putting Kaneki in the Ekko and Leave on the Tracer. If that's, you know, if it's a more Tracer-centric than Ekko-centric meta. So in the right meta, Kaneki's startable, but by no means is he going to become an every week starter because Jimmy has shown enough hit scan potential in Jinmu doing his usual Jinmu things. So it's interesting. I think he increases the options that the hunters have on the DPS side of things, more so than just coming in and looking bad. I've seen a lot of arguments that he just looked terrible on Reaper, and I don't think he looked terrible. I think he was okay. He was passable. He's not going to win it for your team on Reaper like a Bird Ring or a Decay might, but I don't think he's going to straight up lose it for you like I can't come up with an example. Any Reapers that were hard feeding? I don't know. Maybe he's one of the worst starting Reapers, but I think he gets a passing grade. Very quickly before we get into the Washington clip here is the latest tweet from FunnyAstro, which has been deciphered as him being in Korea. He is expected to have a 2-week quarantine, and then he's back at Overwatch. FunnyAstro has been fantastic over the 2020 season. He and Lee Jae-gon distanced themselves as the two best and highest scoring Lucio players who often outscored the lower tier flex supports. So if you're hurting at support and need something, I think FunnyAstro is good enough. And I mean, you know, Toby has looked good, but FunnyAstro is a next level game breaking type main support player. And I think he gets 100% of the playtime going forward. I don't want to guarantee that. Maybe 90% is more how I really feel, because we could see Toby do things like Brig or Mercy or any non-Lucio play. I think Astro's good enough at all those to get the playtime, but it is to be seen how they split. That said, if you need a support, if you're hurting there, Astro is one of the few last lifelines that I think you're going to get from here to the end of the season. That said, let's watch some Washington Justice. And my comment here is the Justice turned things around really fast. After looking miserable in their first June Joust week, they came back with a vengeance, and overall, they showed the ability to play both the primary Lucio Moira comp, as well as the counter comp here as well. This team may not be perfect, they may not be perfectly coached and always come out with the right lineups, but they did, to their credit, adjust, and I don't think there'll be any more blips on the radar like there was that first week. Yeah, it's always possible, but I trust the Justice, and at no point am I going to fade them or stay away from their players. as hard as I did that first go around with following up their terrible first week. Last, to round things out for the Charge, I'm really done with them. This play from Mandu was just a very, very, it was a very poor beat. As I try to break down what I like and don't like about the Charge, it's frustrating because I keep thinking this team will come back and do well. I think Choi Se-won is, if he were on a better team, I think he'd be a serious Rookie of the Year contender. Krong regularly making plays on whatever he's playing. Diva, Hog, Sigma. He looks like a really solid off-tank. Not sure he's among the league's elite, but he's pretty solid. Rio as a main tank, I don't know. Passing grade maybe. For me, Mandu, Kareev, and then of course my Kaylee have all been pretty, unfortunate. Maybe my read's not entirely right, but I don't think any of them have looked very good. I think they're kind of holding this team back. Kareev has not been on his Ana enough, and when he has been on the Ana, he's not been making as many game-changing plays as we're used to seeing. Mandu been struggling with his Lucio, Mercy Brig, and then, Eileen has not been as strong in that classic hit scan role that I think they were hoping Kaylee would fill. So overall, I'm kind of done getting excited about the Charge until they have, probably at least 2 weeks of sustained strong output. So in general, probably even staying away from Choi Se-won and Krong, even in those dailies, because they're good enough that they're going to crush the Valiant, but they're enough below all the other teams that I don't trust them to put out strong weekly outputs of fantasy points here. So let's take a look at some stats, shall we? I thought this would be fun. Starting from the beginning of the season going forward, raw fantasy points, this does not match draft buff. This counts all playoff matches and everything. So those teams that have played in knockouts and in tournaments have more matches, they're going to have more fantasy points. This is just raw points. No best three, no averages, just how many fantasy points did people score. Kind of fun to see on the left, but, not any kind of useful value. Not that the right side has any value either, but on a per 10 basis, the Fuel are still the highest scoring team, the Valiant are the lowest, and it's always kind of funny to see. There's definitely a fairly strong correlation between how good a team is and their rate of scoring fantasy points, obviously because it's a mix of damage and elims and low deaths. So, I don't know. There's nothing here I'm going to break down for any analysis, but sometimes it's fun just to look at these stats, right? This poor Valiant sitting well below both the Spitfire and Titans, and the Charge in that same tier. You kind of have a level jump after that, and then just kind of a gradual increase. Pretty fun to see. Dragon's probably a little bit lower than you would think they would be. Outside of that, probably nothing too crazy. Hope it's interesting. I don't know. Maybe Fusion are lower than we would think they'd be too. Defiant as well. Spark. Geez, crazy stuff here. Maybe someday we'll have a, team-based fantasy game that's a little bit more detailed. If we go to overall scoring this week, it was definitely one of those weeks in Royales or in matchups where if you had one of the top Moira players, you were probably going to win. I play a lot of fantasy football, and it's just one of those days where, you have the 4-touchdown, 200-yard game. That was kind of what happened on the Moira side of things. So I don't know if you follow my Twitter. I called Gangnam Jin as the guy to own. I'm happy that one turned out. He slightly outscored Fielder by metrics, but essentially the same here. Violet and Bebe both played a lot of that Moira comp. So looking back on the week and even looking ahead to the June Joust, I think those Western team flex supports are must starts at whatever budget cost you have to go elsewhere. I can't promise Lucio Moira continues. It seems very, very likely to continue on the control maps. Less likely to continue on other maps, though we did see a fair amount of it on Assault as well. I think in Royales, I'm going to do all that I can in this upcoming week to fit those Moira players into my lineups. They really dominated the week, very unsurprisingly. However, what was a big surprise was the switch on the DPS side of things. So if we look at DPS players specifically, it really caught me off guard that Decay, Prophet, Doha, BQB, Fitz, how well all these guys did. The previous week, the Echoes had dominated. They were getting nanos. They were just pumping out the damage. And with the meta really shifting to the Reaper Ekko side of things, I'm not surprised to see the Reaper outscore the Echoes, because if we look historically at stats, you know, the what do we got here? Let's say if we extend the timeline here to cover through, you know, the latest stats for the year, Reaper's, you know, he's always at the top, not well ahead of Ekko, but still ahead of the Ekko. And in looking at that, it's not surprising. I was just surprised at how quickly we solidified on this, on such heavy Reaper play, both inside and outside of the Lucio Moira comp. So, you know, for the June Joust, for the finals here, I'm probably going to steer more towards those Western Reapers where I can. If I can afford those, then great. Where I can't, I'm not going to force them in there. But it was interesting to see after Echoes had so heavily dominated the previous week, it flipped up on its head, and Reaper was the way to go. May have won you some lineups, some royales if you started them over the Ekko players, since they were also cheaper. That said, I've still had a lot of fun analyzing the Ekko stats for the year. If we go from the beginning of the year to the end and look purely at raids, you definitely get some interesting stuff here. If I'm trying to think of the level of skill of Ekko players, first of all, let's ignore Violet. I think he played this for one point of one map on Volskaya, if I remember correctly. This is a small sample size, but I didn't want to delete it. It's fun having Violet there. Just don't take it seriously. If we look at overall stats, Pelican and Sparkle are really kind of the top two here as far as combination of elims and damage, which is pretty unsurprising. Pelican might be my single favorite Ekko in the world, maybe behind Fleta, who surprisingly doesn't pump out huge numbers like some of the other Ekko players do. A little bit surprising to see for how much we love him on the hero. But as we think, running down our list of Ekko power rankings, very, very, you know, surprised to see Sparkle at the top, right? I think I was very bearish on his capability of playing the hero. He's proven me wrong here, and I love it because Sparkle's been fantastic. I mentioned Kaneki earlier. He also suffers here from a rather small sample size, but really put up some good numbers. And then Nero is another one as well, who I think has not gotten a whole lot of love. But I think on the shock side of things, on a technical, mechanical level, he's looked very good on the hero as well. Going into the year, I had this idea that he might show that he's actually a transcendent talent and do some of what we're seeing guys like, I don't know, like Leave and Shy do. I don't think Nero's on their level, but I do think he is part of that Dante, Doha, maybe Naga tier, maybe Yaki tier. You know, I think Nero belongs in that conversation as a top tier Ekko. So a lot of fun numbers here. If we bust out the Reaper as well, just for the fun of it, because, you know, I have nothing better to do than look at Reaper stats. Let's ignore the who are you effect. But it's kind of fun to see, you know, guys like Decay. Edison actually did have a very solid week on the hero. BQB always near the top of those charts. As kind of mentioned before, Doha, EQO, Kai, Lip. Maybe there's less to be learned from Reaper stats, you know. I'm not going to get too excited about it, but over the course of the year, interesting to see those. If you move the stats and check more recently as well, just for the past weekend or so, Happy always puts out the numbers. Dalton surprisingly put out some good numbers, so nothing too major to learn here, other than, you know, the Reapers really took over this week, pumped out a lot of damage, a lot of elims in a way that we weren't quite expecting. I think I'll leave it at that. It was fun to see live homestands in China and see the live crowd. Enjoyed the crowd noise in the background too. Definitely missed that. And crossing my fingers we get a couple of events here in North America. Would be a ton of fun to get back to that scene. With another week down in Fantasy and looking ahead, the June Joust should be fun with the new buffs that Draft Buff has added. Should be a pretty simple week with, you know, some wild guesses on how the June Joust goes, because who knows what's going to happen there. Coming up on the show in the coming weeks, got one or two guests lined up that I'm very excited about. We'll take a look at stats and some other things in the short break between stages, and then we'll get back to trying to predict what's going to happen meta-wise now that hero pools will be ended. So very much looking forward to that as well. Hey, thanks for hanging around. Always fun recording and chatting with you guys. Any questions, any advice, or lineup questions, I'll do my best to help out with those. Let me know if you got any questions. Have a good one, everyone, and good luck in your June Joust predictions. Talk to you soon.